afternoon. This is Pastor Jerry Castleman from Shepherd's Heart Fellowship. It's good to be with you today. When we fix our eyes on Jesus, He is our peace in the midst of the storm. I'm absolutely convinced of three places where Christ exists in the world, in our lives. I want to take the positions of Christ today and show them how they fit into the very storms which you and I can experience in the world. We're looking at the passage of Matthew 14. It's another crossing over the Galilean Sea experience. It's the storm brewing over the sea. It's the old episode and story of what the disciples went through with Jesus more than once on the Sea of Galilee. It's a familiar story about the crossing when the storm developed in the midst of the sea. First, we've got to notice in this passage how the first place or position where Christ is, He's above creation. The passage says immediately Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and to go on ahead of Him to the other side. Well, He dismissed the crowd. After He had dismissed them, He went up on a mountainside by Himself to pray. When evening came, He was there alone, but the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves, because the wind was against it. Notice first how Christ, in the midst of a stormy world, a stormy creation, and you have them, we have them, we live in this world where storms are going to develop. It may be a storm of finances. It may be a stormy romance. It may be a storm in business dealing. It may be a storm with parental situations in the home or in the workforce. Anywhere in life, storms are bound to come into your life, into our lives. Notice where Christ is. He's on a mountainside above us. He is representative and the very full expression of God Himself. God exists hovering over creation. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And there we have the voice of God coming out and creating, let there be light. So light developed. Let there be the darkness. Let there be separation of land and water. Let there be water. And let fruit develop upon the land, and let us make man in our image, the Father said. Those words came out of Jehovah God, and they are the very words, the very person of the pre-incarnate Word, Jesus the Christ, hovering above creation, loving His creation. Everything looked so good in the beginning. But we know because of sin which had come into the world through our former first parents, Adam and Eve, now we've got wind opposing the boat. They're out in the boat. They're in the middle of the Galilean Sea with the disciples, and the wind develops. There's a wind buffeting and causing waves. There's a wind against the boat. There's a wind that causes these waves to develop. Now we've got a stormy, tossed boat. And the disciples are afraid. Notice that in verse 24 of Matthew 14. The boat was already 3.5 miles out into the northern part of the Sea of Galilee. They are rowing against the wind coming out of the west, the boat rowing into the west, and there's like a perfect storm developing. They become afraid naturally. There are storms like that in your life, in the world that you live. We live in the same world. We all have storms. It depends how we relate to them, how we handle them, and the places we see where Jesus is in our life. So number one, we see Jesus on a mountaintop. He's above creation. He's over creation. And He's above everything that He has created. So there He exists, looking out over the troubled sea of the Galilean. However, notice the second place or position that we find Christ. And so this place now is that he comes off of the mountain and he walks 3.5 miles on the sea. He defies the storm-tossed ocean. He defies the substance, the water. He doesn't sink. He's over nature, everything he has created. The storms have come in this world. The storms have developed. He's over all of that. And he walks now on top of the water, defying the elements of the substance, the very substance he has created. He's like that in the second position in our lives. When storms develop, when troubles come, when it gets dark and the storm clouds develop, relationships come in and they're troublesome. There's issues in finances, issues in all episodes of life. And these storms often come because we allow ourselves to hold on to them and not allowing the master creator of the world and all the substance, all the creator of every substance in creation. We haven't allowed him to come and be involved and take over in the midst of our storm. But notice here, it was during the fourth watch of that night. The hour would have been 3 or up to 6 a.m. in the morning. He walks on the sea. He walks out to the disciples into the middle of the Galilean Sea. He walks over the troubles. He walks over the wind and the waves. Now notice, they become, when they saw him, terrified. They were terrified because they saw the unnatural. The unnatural is the miraculous. And it causes the question to wonder of why do we get scared or become terrified when God works in unnatural ways, in the supernatural, rising above the elements of the natural order of things. Sometimes is so terrifying to us. Sometimes I wonder if we'd rather just stay in the storm and allow us to understand the storm that we're in and to perish below. And at least we would feel comfortable in the knowing the elements we're in of the natural order. How unusual is it and how better is it to allow the master of creation, Jesus Christ himself, to come into the midst of our troubles, into the stormy sea, into our very predicament, things that we have even caused ourselves, even death itself, allowing the master to come in and walk above the natural order of things because he's a supernatural God. He's a miraculous God working in the most unusual ways, the miraculous ways in the natural order of our troubles. When they saw him, they were terrified. And they cried out in fear until Jesus said, "Take courage." And why take courage in such terrible times? When Jesus said, "I am he," that's why we can become aware of God working in the midst. But we've got to let him into our troubles. Let him take over our stormy sea. It's so hard where you are and where I am to often lose our grip and let God take over and do what he does. It's so easy for us to hold on to our troubles, to hold on to the things that we may have very well caused ourselves because we've got control. Here Jesus said, "Take courage, it is I." We use the passage of Psalm 46 so often in troublesome times, where Psalm 46 says, "God is our refuge and our strength, an ever-present help in the time of trouble." And in verse 10 of Psalm 46, the word says, "Be still and know that I am God." That's allowing Jesus to take this second position. The first position was God above, but we allow him now in this second position to be God in the midst of our storm, to come down off of creation, come off of the mountain, And he did that by going to the cross. He did that coming out of the heavens, going to the cross, becoming crucified on the old rugged cross for the storms of sin that so often take control in our lives. He came to forgive us of our sins. He came to heal us of our infirmities. He does that for you today, and he does that for all of us because we live in the storm-tossed world of darkness and sin. But the second position is we allow him to come into the midst of the storm. He said, "Take courage. Don't be afraid. I am here." Notice Peter said in Matthew 14, "Lord, if it's you, let me come to you. Let me walk on the water." Peter was actually giving in to the thought, I'm losing my grip on this trouble, and I'm going to trust Jesus Christ. So he took one step out of the boat, and he began to walk on the water. He took a second step, and he was walking on the water towards Jesus. His eyes were not focused on the storm. His eyes were not focused on the wind crashing against the boat or upon the dark souls of the trouble of that storm. But suddenly, the wind again caught his attention. Peter began to look to the left, to the right, and he saw the boat being tossed by the wind, and again he was in trouble. The disciples were again in trouble. They saw the wind. You see, Peter began to sink into the water because he looked around and saw the troubles again. He lost the fixedness of his eyes upon Jesus. And that's what happens in the world today when we lose our fixed eyes upon Jesus and him alone, to be still and know that he is God. When we don't do that, we begin to sink and fall into the heart of the sea. And Peter did one thing, one miraculous thing. He said, "Lord, save me from this. Save me from myself. Save me from the storm." And immediately, the hand of God through Jesus reached out and took a hold of Peter. So you have God above, Christ above on the mountain, watching the storm-tossed boat in the midst of the Galilean Sea. And now you find Jesus Christ coming down into the storm in the second place where we must allow him to come into the storms of our trouble. He came, and eventually he grabbed Peter and saved him from sinking into the water. And now this third position is Jesus Christ gets into their boat. This is so hard for us to do today, to allow him and to believe that he's the master of creation, that he's the master of our storm. But when Jesus said, "Take courage, it is I," and he saved Peter from the sinking water, Peter again took his eyes and looked into the eyes of Jesus Christ and became focused on the Lord. There's things that you and I can't do, and we become weak in our faith. We become weak in how we operate in life. We make mistakes, and we begin to seek in the midst of our troubles. Jesus Christ is a graceful Lord Jesus Christ. He saves us from what we actually cause in our life. And immediately, because Peter fixed his eyes on Christ and trusted Jesus Christ to lift him above the water, Jesus Christ then went into the boat, and they both together, Peter and Jesus, walked into the boat. Now notice what happened. Verse 32 of Matthew 14 says the wind died down. When Jesus stepped into the boat with Peter, safely into the boat, the wind ceased. The wind stopped. Those who were in the boat were so amazed at this miracle, were so amazed at having Jesus in their presence, so amazed at allowing the master of the sea to become the master of my stormy heart, my stormy life. Immediately, the wind stopped. There was no longer any contrary wind against the boat or against the soul. And even when there's troubles in the life and troubles in the world, when Jesus is allowed to come into the midst of it all and step inside the boat, the troubles, the wind will stop coming against the boat. I'm not saying that we won't have troubles. We'll have troubles in the world. There will be storms. But when he's in the midst of the storm and your eyes and my eyes, our eyes together are focused upon Jesus Christ, he comes down from above. He comes into our troubles. He comes into the storm-tossed, stormy sea area where the wind is crashing against the boat. And he reaches for us and saves us up out of the sinking water. And he steps inside our boat, inside our home, inside our lives. And immediately, because we have peace like a river, a calming sensation where Jesus says again, "Be still and know that I am God." Then the winds will die down and somehow he makes everything happen. Then we begin to worship him in the midst of that, the reality of that miracle. The word says in verse 32 of Matthew 14, not only did the wind die down, that was so contrary to the boat, that they began to worship the Lord, and they admitted, truly, Jesus, you are the Son of God. Will you do that today? Fix your eyes upon the Master of the Sea. Let him come down from where he is. He's going to do it anyways. He's going to be in the world, but allow him to come into your personal situation, your private situations that only he and you can converse of or with. And then the winds die down. He becomes the master of your trouble, the master over your life. And then you admit and confess, you, Jesus Christ, are truly the Son of God. Go today knowing that he is the Son of God in the world and the master over your troubled eyes. Fix your eyes upon him and keep your eye focused today on the Lord, and he will get you through any storm that comes your way. God bless you. Have a great day. Again, this is Pastor Jerry from Shepherd's Heart Fellowship. God bless you.